disclaimer, this is not a real counseling session. This is just a role play video for our class. Well, thank you so much for coming and seeing me. I'm sure that you had a great week and made some progress from some of the goals we discussed last week. So if you want to just tell me how you're feeling and where your thoughts are and what's going on, that'd be really great.
Okay, well, I've been feeling a little weird just because some of the thoughts I've been having just will pop in my head, and I try to redirect, but it's kind of hard to do that. So, I don't know. What do you think I should do?
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about these thoughts that you're having. Can you go in a little depth about the kind of content of these thoughts and what they are?
Yeah, sometimes I have just thoughts. I know this is kind of extreme, but sometimes I'll have kind of these intrusive thoughts about death and thinking about that I might die at some point, which everyone does, but they'll pop in my head when I'm not wanting to be thinking about that, and I'd rather just get about my day. So do you have any tips maybe for how I can deal with those, and especially how I can let them come to mind without them causing me anxiety?
Yeah, that can be really difficult when we have thoughts just come into our minds, especially out of the blue. When you have these thoughts and these reactions and everything, is there any events or anything that kind of spurs them on, or are these thoughts just something that kind of have no connection with anything?
Yeah, they just seem to pop up out of nowhere usually.
I'm sorry to hear that. That can probably be very frustrating.
Yeah.
Especially with anxiety. That can also be really hard and really frustrating to deal with. Well, thoughts are definitely a really powerful thing. And can you kind of describe some of the thoughts that, the way the feelings how they make you feel? I know you said anxious, but can you maybe go in depth a little bit more?
Yeah. Usually, if I dwell on one of those thoughts for too long, I can kind of get into this rut in my head, and they'll just kind of become cyclical. So I'll go around and around and around on the same thing without actually getting to the end of it and it coming to a resolution. So usually it makes me anxious and also just frustrated too. And usually, like I said, it's either death or just a fear about something happening, that I'll do something that's against my character or something wrong, or that something will happen just in general that is problematic. Maybe that someone that I'm close to will betray me or something weird like that, which the normal part of my brain, logical, is oh yeah, obviously that's not gonna happen. But then there's that side that says, no, you should be afraid and be careful because such and such thing could happen. So that's the tricky thing, is looking past that and not being afraid of those thoughts and not letting those feelings guide my thoughts and trying to just, I guess, do what I'm wanting to do instead of being stuck in my head.
Because it's kind of like you're on a merry-go-round and it just keeps on coming back and coming back.
They're controlling me instead of me controlling those thoughts. And I think one thing that helps sometimes is reading the Word or praying about it. But then other times, if I start reading the Bible or praying, then I'll start having more thoughts pop up, okay, what if I'm not doing this right? Or what if I'm not hearing from the Lord and it's just me? So that can be a difficulty too.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate how you just share the way you try to combat these thoughts, and sometimes that can be really hard. And spending time in the Word and meditating and dwelling on His Word can be really helpful. So even in that, maybe finding a verse that can help you. I know that the Bible tells us about how, do not be anxious about everything, but in everything pray, so the peace of God might come in you. And so kind of backtracking to your thoughts. So it kind of, from what you've told me a little bit about these thoughts that comes into your head, it's almost like you see the worst situation.
Yeah, sometimes.
So it's kind of like if you were in the car and you'd be driving, it's almost like, oh, I am driving, but I'm afraid that there's going to be a car accident.
Yeah, or just like what ifs that come to my head. What if I accidentally hit a pedestrian? What if I accidentally run into the back of somebody? You know, stuff like that. Not necessarily what if somebody like plows into me or something. You know, it's more like what am I doing wrong? So that's tough.
That can be really tough, and you know, sometimes in our heads and our minds, we make up these beliefs about ourselves, you know, and they kind of control how we think and how we function.
Yeah.
So kind of the belief that, oh, I'm always going to run into something, you know, I'm always, those always statements or those never statements can really be really crippling.
For sure. Yeah. I think I need to be careful not to make something always and never, but it can be difficult when, you know, that's what your brain is telling you. So
Yeah.
what would you say would be a good way to combat intrusive thoughts? Like maybe a process if like one comes to my mind.
Oh, that's a really great question. So what we can do a little bit of role playing here.
Yeah.
If you'd like, maybe you can think of one of those thoughts that kind of come into your head, and I can help you kind of work through maybe different wordings we can think through. How does that sound?
That sounds good.
Okay, so go ahead and think of one of those intrusive thoughts that you think of, and maybe one that uses like an always or never, and we'll try to rework it to see we can have more positive and a less effective, you know, hindrance on you.
Okay. Maybe an always statement that is not too extreme but still affects me. Maybe having to do with financial stability. Kind of like thinking I'll always be, or I guess it could be a never. Never have enough money to, you know, be able to give enough away or to have something that I want, which isn't a good thought. But yeah, it will come once in a blue moon.
Yeah, and it kind of, you dwell on it and everything.
Yeah.
So, you know, instead of thinking, wow, I'll never financially be stable enough to support others, or, you know, I'll never be able to, you know, have enough money to be safe or be secure.
Yeah.
Maybe a better kind of outlook, instead of saying those always and never, is, well, things might be tight right now, but it won't always be this way. Or, you know, another way you can look at it is, though financially it might be hard right now, there are opportunities to grow, or there are opportunities to save, or there's, you know, kind of some things like that. Instead of putting the pressure on the negative, looking at the opportunities that can grow from it. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think I might have another one too.
Okay, absolutely. Let's go ahead and talk about that one.
Well, maybe having to do with family. Maybe I used to be more close with my family, my mom and dad, but I think something that's difficult is, even though we used to have a pretty strong, similar, I guess, same ideas about politics and just beliefs and all that good stuff. But sometimes, particularly with my dad, we don't see things the same way as before. So how would you say, I guess sometimes that makes me think that I'm not good enough for my dad. How would you say I should rethink that?
Oh, that's a really great question. And you know, family, they mean a lot to us. So a lot of times those thoughts, when we have different times come up. So let's backtrack. Where's a time where you felt like your father when you were not good enough?
Usually for a long time we were really close, but less so now, and I think that's just been within the last few years. I can't really think of a specific time. I guess maybe I could include, I can look back to when we went to his family reunion and we were driving home from a family reunion. I was kind of just explaining something to him, and instead of agreeing, which is fine if he doesn't agree, I guess I need to be more okay with that. He was just like, no, it's okay, I like hearing your perspective, which is good, but still part of me felt uncomfortable and sad because he didn't have this, we didn't like just
Gel.
And then it's a difficult thing when for so long you've been totally chill, like had the same beliefs.
Yeah, that's.
And you look up to.
Yeah, that's really hard when you look up to your father and that parent figure, and you just want to please them. Absolutely. So I think you brought up a very good point. Thank you for sharing that moment.
Sure.
And so that moment of just not seeing eye to eye, and you're wow, I'm never going to be good enough. Instead of having that perspective, having this sense of like, it's okay to have different opinions and different values, because we're different people, and you're still his daughter.
Yeah.
And
I still love him, and he still loves me.
Exactly. So a lot of times those negative thoughts can really bog down, and kind of make us think irrationally in certain aspects, and that because of one differing opinion that you and your father might have, you might think, oh wow, that is can spiral to I'm not good enough.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's tricky. But I think it's good to be able to discuss those things without being afraid of what the other person will think. It's just different when you've had similar perspectives for a good amount of time. So, but
do you have?
I don't remember what I was gonna say. It's okay.
Oh, it's okay. Let me just ask you. You talked a lot about anxiety and about death and things like that. Is there any anxiety or things that come up when you think about your relationship with your parents?
Yeah, they are a little bit older, so sometimes I think it's better now. But sometimes I did used to be afraid of them dying because I was so close with them. And still I am. But I think maybe that's partially why the Lord has allowed me to think a little more for myself, because I do focus more on what I believe and who I am instead of just who they are and what they've taught me. And that's good because it's given us enough distance to where I'll grieve when they do go, but I'll also not feel like a huge part of me is missing away.
Yeah.
I just now thought of that. Never thought about that before, so that's kind of good. Thank you for asking that.
Yeah, no, I think you did a really great job bringing up a very good point of how, even though it's scary and it can be anxiety ridden thinking about death and everything, but made a good point. That was a good truth that you have your own opinions, you have your own beliefs, but you're still loved by them and you're still cared by them, and you're able to live your life together and growing. So that was a really good example of how you took some of those irrational beliefs before and be able to integrate more positive thoughts as well. So that's I'm really proud of you for doing that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So yeah, thoughts about how I've been feeling this week. Do you think that you have any other pointers in terms of how to manage intrusive thoughts?
Yeah, so I think you made a lot of good progress from this week to last week. Just that moment ago, that was really good, and that shows progress and growth towards our goals.
Yeah, I'm glad.
Yeah, which is really great. So let's keep on moving towards the present and our thoughts that we kind of have, and not really think about the past, but keep on moving forward. So let's think about this week coming up and maybe keeping a thought journal
Okay.
How does that sound? Whenever you do have one of those intrusive thoughts of, man, I am never good enough for my father, or, wow, I'm afraid of death. Every time I go into the car, I fear death, or fear, like you said, hitting a pedestrian.
Yeah.
Maybe just jot those down and then instead implement more positive words and more realistic beliefs of knowing that, no, I am a good driver, nothing is going to happen, oh, I know that I am loved by my father, and try to work in some of those more positive beliefs into our everyday self-talk.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Susie.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to maybe practice one right now? Maybe see one that you can see a intrusive thought might come in and how you would rework that?
Sure. So I guess one thing that I might be doing throughout the day is I'm making dinner. So let's say that I'm making some shrimp tacos. And then all of a sudden, I'll get out the salsa and I'll think, oh no, what if it secretly has something in the salsa? Like what if it's past date or it has something in it that's not good for you? So instead of dwelling on that, I'll think I should probably be more aware of, this also looks delicious and it has a good date, so it's gonna go really well in these tacos. Instead of being like, oh no, what if that thought is correct, that intrusive thought, that this salsa is gonna poison me or something weird like that. That seems totally irrational. And just be more focused on actually making dinner for whoever I'm preparing food for. And I'll redirect my thoughts and think, man, I really love cooking dinner and I'm excited to enjoy this meal.
That sounds really good. I know sometimes it can be really hard and thoughts pop into our head that don't seem very realistic.
Yeah.
But it's good to just pause for a second, take a deep breath, and realize, maybe this thought isn't very rational. Well, I think we have a good basis heading into next week, and
I'll make sure to write down some of those thoughts when they pop up.
oh, thank you. And it will be great. We can maybe start our section next week with kind of going right through and looking over those thoughts. How does that sound?
That sounds great.
All right. Well, thank you for coming in. I really